Okay, what would you like me to talk about?
Well, we heard a little bit about Dad's story, and I'm looking for another perspective, because sometimes it's hard for us to see what is going on in our own world, or even after the fact. So just wondering what your recount of the story was.
It was a really, really trying time, and I guess none of us really expected that he wouldn't have a job or that the company would ever close. I mean, it was just so unexpected because it had been a very, very strong business running 3 shifts, shipping furniture worldwide for 40 years. And it was started in a garage, and the business kept growing, and it was something that he had done since the time he was out of high school. And he was obviously very good at his job, because he was able to move from one position to another and continue to get advancements at his work. But when we look back on it, he wasn't able to see any of that. It was just a really difficult thing, because I don't think none of the employees there, and they had hundreds of employees, 350 employees at one time, and I don't think anybody expected that it wouldn't be there forever. And particularly people like Harry, who they started out there when they were out of high school. Many of these people did, and many of these people retired. And as it became more clear, we by accident found out that the company wasn't paying their health insurance, and these employees who had been counting on this health insurance and paying into this policy forever now found out that they don't have any health insurance. We found that out by accident when he had to have surgery on his ear and needed some medical leave. And then we find out that there's no insurance, and the insurance was being kept by the union, and then the union later confirmed that no, they hadn't been paying the premium for over a year already, and that they were way behind. And then by this time, it started becoming real clear that this pension issue was also managed by the union, and if they weren't paying health insurance, what about pension funds? Come to find out, many of these employees had not had the opportunity to find out anything about their pension because they had no intention of leaving. And so then when he found out that many people were not any longer enrolled in the pension program, that was another shock. By this time, the company was saying, well, if you all take $1 an hour less per hour, we'll be able to save the company. And so being dedicated people, and people who really had no intention of doing anything else, they believed that. And they took their dollar cut, and then it was another dollar cut. And then the next thing they knew, they were laid off. And it wasn't just for the annual shutdown of 2 weeks, which happened every year, but it was 2 weeks, and then they'd extended out another 2 weeks. By that time, it got to be several months that they were extended out, and nobody knew if they worked or if they didn't. And by the time that the company actually announced that, they're going to extend the leave again, by this time, the state of Minnesota actually stepped in and said, no, you are either going to be upfront with these people and tell them they don't have a job, or get them back to work. It was at that time that they got a letter from the company saying, oh, by the way, we're needing to file bankruptcy. We're hopeful that we can get financing, things like that. And that drug on for another 6 months. So in the meantime, here's all these people sitting without any income, no health insurance. And the really devastating part was there were many husband-wife teams that worked there. And so for people like us, it wasn't even as devastating because I had a job, so at least had my income to make the major bills. But with husband-wife teams, they had nothing anymore. And I just remember looking back on it, it was a really, really hard time, and I remember Harry being very angry and very hurt that how could they do this to us. And it wasn't about doing this to them. The company didn't have any money. And it's always interesting that the people running the company or the presidents make sure that they have all their pensions in line and their money is secured before they file bankruptcy. These employees had no warning. They had no money, they had no health insurance, they had nowhere to go. And many of them, very much like him, dedicated their life to this place, put in every minute of overtime that the company ever asked for. They worked weekends, they worked long days, they worked, whatever was needed. And then they were told, oh, by the way, we don't have no money, so we're done. And I remember the serious depression. I mean, this is truly very, very hard for people. It's devastating because this is their life, and they had no intention of doing anything else at all. They were going to retire there, even though maybe they weren't the most happy people in the world. They gave it their all, and never once dreamt that it would be a choice of someone else that they weren't able to work. And Harry did go through a very serious depression, and a very long period, or seems like a long period from my perspective, where he literally had no energy to do anything. He felt used, he felt abused, he was just, didn't know what to do, and didn't understand that he did have skills. I mean, you don't just work at a place 10 years or 20 or 30 or 36 years and have no skills. And I mean, that's everybody in that place, but the people being blue-collar workers are kind of in that mode where they don't really ever sit down and think about, what skills do I have? What do I have to offer? Who else is going to want me? And why? Why would they want me? This company didn't want me anymore. And so I think for him, the very hardest part was getting beyond that self-defeat and being able to say, okay, my life is going nowhere. It is time that I move forward. I have a family, and I am proud of what my responsibility is toward my family, and therefore I need to do something. And sitting on the couch and being depressed wasn't getting something done. So I just remember it took a lot of practice and a lot of encouragement and a lot of soul searching for himself to figure out, okay, what did I do with 36 years of my life while I was employed there? I welded, I set up machines, I was a lead supervisor, I had 40 people under me. Maybe there are a few things that I can promote to someone else. Maybe someone else will want me. I think it was very, very difficult because people like Harry had never had to apply for a job. They didn't know the first thing about applying for a job. And he had a little bit of computer skills because many of the programs that they were using at Homecrest were computerized. But it wasn't like computer skills like using the internet or being able to do a search for jobs or filling out a resume. It was practical skills of data entry, numbers, various programs that needed to be attended to. So at least in his case, the computer wasn't a total foreign animal, but more of a inconvenience. Creating a resume was a real trip because he didn't have a clue where to begin. And luckily, I was able to help with that process for him and say, okay, this is what a resume would include. This is what an employee is looking for. What have you done in this area? What are your work skills? What jobs have you done? What are your qualifications? You're lucky, you're a high school graduate. Many of the people who were employed there weren't. So you at least have, that part going for you. But looking at individual duties, what did you do? Separating those duties and then looking at skills. And once he started putting it down on paper, I think it became obvious, and it gave him a little more courage and a little more enthusiasm about maybe he did have something to offer. And I remember sitting for many days when he actually got that first interview and going over, okay, these are questions your employer might ask you. These are ways you might answer that. Now tell your story. And I think it's really important to know what your skills are, know what your abilities are, and be able to focus on those, not what you can't do, or not the anger or the disappointment or the depression of having lost your job, but what do you have to offer? And many employers... Got dinosaurs? I know, the purple dinosaur. It's marvelous, isn't it? Do you like the purple one? Do I get the purple one? It's a great purple dinosaur, isn't it?
And sometimes you have to adapt to the situation.
And sometimes you have an orange dinosaur. I think once he started practicing and knowing what employers might ask, and the questions are... Loud one? I think you're the loud one. Are you loud? Is the red dinosaur beautiful? Huh? Are you helping with the interview today?
Did the dinosaur get you?
I think once he got beyond that point of believing that he didn't have any skills to understanding that he actually did, things started to fall into place for him. It doesn't happen overnight, and it certainly didn't for him. This is a long process, and it's a lot of hurt and a lot of anger and a lot of depression that a person needs to begin to deal with and begin to look outside of the box, because it's real easy to keep doing the same thing you've been doing, but is it getting the result that you really want? And if it's not getting what you want, then you obviously need to do something different. And that's the point that Harry had to get at, is when he was able to get that interview and be able to explain his skills to somebody on paper in order to first get the interview. And then once in the interview, I'm sure he was probably nervous as a cat sitting there thinking, what am I doing? And I think once he interviewed a couple of times and at least knew that, you know what, maybe somebody does want me. Maybe I do have skills that an employer could appreciate. And with a long-standing work history, you have the stability of an employer knowing that obviously you can do things. And you as the person applying needs to get to that point that you believe you have skills, because if you don't believe that, they aren't even going to be interested. You're not going to look good to them. You're not going to look like someone they want to have in their company, no matter how big or small that company is. And